There's a way that technology helps us release creativity in everybody, no matter what their job.
We've kind of trained ourselves to be robots, and now we're training the robots.
New technology is often threatening because only certain people know it.
Today, I'm joined by Patty McCord. Patty McCord is a straight-talking former chief talent officer at Netflix. She co-created the Netflix Culture Deck, a presentation laying out the company's values, and a document that Sheryl Sandberg once called the most important document ever to come from Silicon Valley. McCord is the author of Powerful, Building a Culture of Freedom and Responsibility, a best-selling book where she shares advice for leaders who want to build successful teams. I've had the absolute pleasure of listening to Patty several times on my speaking tours, and I can't wait to hear what she's got to say. Welcome to the show today, Patty.
Hi, Tom. Good to see you again.
We're going to start with a predictable question, which is to ask you what your wildest prediction for the future is.
Okay, you ready for this? My wildest prediction is that AI won't be the big scary thing that we think it's going to be. And it's going to do a lot of great things for us. And it's going to integrate into our lives. And we'll get over the fear that we always have of new technology.
You're kind of getting towards perhaps your bigger answer there. Why do you think the fears are overblown? Is this just something that always happens?
I think it kind of always happens. I was thinking this morning about examples because, I'm really old and I can go back in time. The other thing is that I'm a Silicon Valley elder, right? So I was working at Sun Microsystems, a big computer company, supposedly the inventors of the internet, right, in the 90s. And we had a computer. It was a desktop. We called it a workstation, but it was a very, very high-powered workstation, and people used it to map the ocean floor, really high data-intensive stuff. But it also published newspapers and magazines. So basically, on my desktop, I had a publishing software, and I'm in HR, right? Who's not at the time was not known for being particularly tech savvy, but it was amazing what you could do with this, right? So I leave and I go to another company. It's another tech company. It's closer to home. And because I'm in HR, on my desk, they give me this, maybe the first computer ever made. There's no network. It's barely got a word processor. And I'm used to dragging and dropping paragraphs and pushing buttons, inserting photos and making graphs. And I was like, what is this? And I said, can you send me a file? And a friend of mine came over and handed me a floppy disk. And I said, hey, thanks. And I thought, what the hell? I didn't even know what to do with it, right? I'm like, you can't send it on we called it the net. You can't send it on the net. They're like, what's that? And, in no time at all, we were able to do all of those things. But I remember the panic that I sat down and I realized, oh my God, I won't be able to do my job as well because I don't have access to this technology that I'm not even supposed to care about. Because I was in HR, right? All I needed to care about really was word processing and maybe a spreadsheet to work on everybody's salary, right?
Yeah.
And even then, I'd print out on the dot matrix or whatever. But my point is, what it taught me was it's always exciting. There's always a thrill of something that's really new that you don't understand.
But is there not a sense that kind of this time it's different? Working in technologies at the start of these profound new technologies coming about, did it feel sinister at the time, or is everyone enthusiastic? And how does that compare with how people feel now?
It always feels sinister. I was thinking about it today. I was thinking that part of it is dystopian science fiction.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure you can separate those two words because it's hard to find science fiction that's like really happy. Like, no, I mean, it's always about like, oh, look, this could 1984, right? The pigs could take over. And, um, and I think there's always this aversion to that. And there's always a fear that the next generation will do something evil with it, and yet we spend the first 5, 10 years of any new technology protecting our children from it.
Are there any particular applications of AI that you find particularly easy to see the benefit of, and that you
Oh,
struggle to see any sort of downsides for?
sure, medicine, the ability to, properly read, uh, medical charts and X-rays and CT scans and that and in fact, probably even developing better devices, because AI learns, right? I mean, it's so great about it. So in the, with a narrow focus, I think about it as like, super employees some ways, but and I'll get to the downside in a minute. But in the super employee way, the hardest thing is like putting boundaries on them,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Go in this lane as fast as you frickin' can to this end. And wow, I mean, that could happen in days instead of years. And I think that's really, really exciting. And I think that a lot of the mundane things that we do can be taken care of without humans just, bonking the keyboard. Now, where it gets scary are my friends who are fellow authors and creatives and artists. And now that I don't work in tech anymore, that's who I spend a lot of time with these days. And I mean, the artists, the authors are already flipping out because there are these pocket-sized versions of their books that are just AI scrapes, right? And they're like, "Wait a minute," and they're like, I just hey, by the way, I just searched your book, and by the way, I found 7 versions of it, and 2 of them are in, Hungarian, and they're total rip you didn't I know, I read it, you didn't have anything to do with it." And so that's scary. And then the artist part, I have a group of artists. I was on the board of this guild for artists. And we have these conversations of like, oh my God, it's really going to, it's going to take away. What about my creativity? What about my painting? And I'm like, Dave, you paint digitally live now. Like his shtick is he goes to events, right? And he on his, his iPad makes these incredible paintings instead of drawings or hand drawings on the whiteboard, of the speakers, and they're unbelievable. But I'm like, "You're doing it on an iPad, you goober."
What are things that we should be watching out for? I was thinking the other day, like actually part of the problems with AI taking people's jobs is a lot of people's jobs have become more robotic. Like
Yep.
if I think about when I first entered advertising, people had quite fun jobs. Their job was to go out and talk to people, to video people,
Yeah,
to look
right.
around IKEA, to buy a bed to put in the office to inspire people. And now people are kind of clicking away on spreadsheets, copying from cell D6 and putting it into F12. Like we've kind of trained ourselves to be robots.
Yeah.
And now we're training the robots. And I kind of wonder in retrospect if it wasn't sort of obvious that this was coming because we've stopped being human in our jobs.
We've stopped let me parse that a little bit. Okay? Because there are jobs that we have that the jobs themselves are not very human. And you just described one, right? Move cell A to, tab B and slot it with like you're describing, for example, like moving from a spreadsheet to a relational database or something like
Yeah.
that. The relational database can suck the data and you don't have to do that. Well, that's a really boring, terrible, not very interesting job. And because it's that, a lot of mistakes happen because it's not very interesting, right? Let me do another history example. I was reading the other day about globalization, And, it's because we can build computers cheaper in China because everybody does screws the screws with their little tiny fingers or whatever the myth is. Um, but a lot of the reason that those jobs moved out of the US was robotics,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Was because and the other thing we forget about with things like robotics is part of the reason that if you go into a Tesla factory, which I have done, it's as much as you can hate Elon, and I do, the Tesla factory is pretty darn wonderful. And
Just
there
lots
are,
of robots everywhere.
oh, they're so cool. And you know what? They're safe, right? They're welding the underside of a chassis of a car in a tenth of the time it used to take a human, and nobody's losing their digits, and right? I mean, it's safer, and the people that are doing, like, even the mechanical jobs in that factory ride around in, these great, like, tricycle carts, and in the back is all their it's very cool. So, a lot of what happened with globalization in America was that we replaced a lot of that work with robotics, right? Now, we did a terrible job at vocationally training the people that used to do the work to be the people that can maintain and sustain the robotics. And I think part of it was there was an internal bias that said, "Oh, these are people without skills and training. They won't be able to do it." Right?
Yeah.
Which the truth is, they've yeah, they can, right? Nobody ever asked them to do it. So I think there's a way that technology helps us release creativity in everybody no matter what their job. Which
And
is
is that
why
something?
I brought up the son and the HR thing. It's like, I wasn't supposed to be able to desktop publish, but damn, back in the day when we did newsletters, mine were pretty amazing.
And what does
So
that look like? I mean, how do you think these jobs in these companies in the kind of medium term future,
I think in
are
the
people?
medium I think in the medium term future, like all of our technology, it's gonna be really frustrating because half the people don't wanna have anything to do with it because it's not the way we've always done. It's, like everything you and I talk about anyway about companies, right? Half of the people are gonna go, "All right, let's do a third, a third, a third." A third of the people are
Yeah.
gonna go, "That's not the way we've always done it. We figured this out. We've seen this before. You guys go play, and I'm just going to keep my nose to the ground, do what we've always done because it's always worked for me." Right? Then there's going to be a bunch of people who are like, this is second coming of Christ. It's amazing. Everything should happen in AI. I'm going to do everything in AI. I'm going to do it. And because the technology's new, they're going to make a bunch of mistakes. Right. And they're going to, it's going to overuse it. They're going to use it for stuff that doesn't matter. It's going to be, all kinds of crazy stuff. And they're going to make mistakes. And a lot of companies, depending on who they are and what they do and what their culture is, are either going to lean into that or lean away from it. And the middle third will follow whoever is getting the attention or making the
Okay.
money or get right. So it's a very interesting and difficult transition when a new technology enters the workplace because of that, because of how error prone it tends to be at the beginning, right?
Yeah.
And that always, sort of separates the "I don't care" from the "we must do what we always have done," right? And then, pretty soon there'll be applications that are really helpful and really work. And then people start embracing those. And the other thing that will happen is it'll get easier to use.
Yeah.
ChatGPT may be easy for you, but the rest of most of the people I know are like, "Oh, I just don't know." Right. So uh, it's it's a it's a learning curve for every new time. And because I, spent some time in a company that changed the way we did everything, I've kind of had a front row seat to, like, the people that are like, I don't want to have anything to do with this. And it's not a like, oh, I'm sorry, but you're out of a job because you don't understand it. It's a slow roll.
Yeah. When you look at some of your kind of older work, whether it's the Netflix culture deck or some of
Yeah.
your kind of earlier writing, like
Yeah.
when you look at it now, your sort of best hits, or even your kind of quotes that you're famous for, do any of them seem less relevant now? Like the way that you think about culture, the way you think about teams, the way you think about curiosity, policies, trust, treating people like adults. Does any of that stuff feel less kind of relevant now?
No, it feels so much more relevant. I mean, the whole and let me tell you kind of a secret about what you just said. I was like, "Oh, great, he's gonna now I need to discuss my entire life's work in the next 20 minutes with Tom. No problem." Um, the the ability to people will experiment and play with as big of a boundary as you give them.
Hmm.
And if you say your job is right here, right? And that's all you can think about, that's all you can do, that's all you can contribute. Don't go outside the boundary. Um, those are easy jobs to pick off with
Yeah.
technology, right? Because it's only one thing. And in the early stages of new technology, what you want to do is you want to focus the new technology on things that matter. And typically, it's like I said earlier, then you pick a narrow lane, you focus on it, and you have success there. So the people who have those jobs that are in those little narrow lanes, they'll get picked off because by their nature, right? But if you widen the boundaries for people and say, here's the purpose of what you're doing. Here's how it contributes to the overall organization. More importantly, here's how it contributes to, and I think this is the key to success for AI. Here's how it contributes to the world or our customer or our client, right? Because
Yeah.
if you're in a capitalist society, that tends to be who you're pleasing is the client, right? So if you start there and say, so what we want you to do is continue to make this thing that you do as great as it can be for that end user, right? So now
Yeah.
I've opened up the boundaries, right? It's this thing, but I'm doing it as part of this larger organization in order to accomplish this, right? And when the context of all of that is part of people's lives at work. Oh, I understand why we're doing this. And I think AI is going to give us yet another tool to say, wow, how can we make what can we use? What technologies can we use to enhance this thing? And when people start thinking about it as a tool, and that's the scary part of particularly about AI, is it a tool or is it a robot or is it a pseudo human, right? And will it be a sex bot? Oh, wait a minute, I'm talking about work, right? But like, what exactly is it, and then will it threaten me?
You talk quite a lot about, I don't think you use the word pride, but in quite a lot of your work, there does seem to be a sense that people should feel good about the progress they're making and people
Yeah.
should feel part of something. Do you think in an era where some of this stuff is done by these black boxes, like I don't like talking about robots because it sounds a bit far-fetched, but when people are kind of perhaps taking less of an active participatory role in what they do you think that will have an impact on a structure and pride and how people feel rewarded beyond salary?
Yeah, let's I wanna challenge the one thing you said, "Oh, it's kinda like robots." We've had robots for, decades now, and we just don't think about them as robots anymore. As soon as technology takes over some part of our work or our home, we're like, we don't it's technology, it's not robots. I mean,
Yeah.
my if I leave my fridge door open too long, I get the app on my watch says literally, I'm not kidding you. It sends me a beep and it says, "Hey, Patty, your fridgy door is open." Like, oh my God, thank God I got that notice. Whoo, fridgy, I'm coming, don't worry. Um, I think it's threatening. I think new things are threatening, new technology particularly. And new technology is often threatening because only certain people know it, right? And that's where even for organizations with very open cultures, with where people have a lot of freedom and responsibility, which is what I talk about, it's just a little scary. It's
Yeah.
like, do I have the freedom to let that black box think for me? Um, but even now, I mean, look at all the things we find every day. You see something about, I ask AI the answer to this question, and they gave me a totally wrong answer.
Yeah.
Well, it was wrong if you use judgment, but the AI didn't use judgment. AI used data. And I think what we're getting at, the real meat of it is that never ending, I think, beautiful exploration of like data versus human.
Hmm.
In my experience at work, there can be a really happy marriage there. Um,
It always has worked out well. Like throughout history, we're
eh,
kind of following exactly the same pattern. There is a kind of a sense that this time is different because it's kind of like thinking, and therefore the very most sort of human parts of our brains, like our judgment, our intuition, our creativity,
yeah, but
like you can see it both ways.
I remember when my son was 5, he said to me, "Mom, what's air?" I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, and in my generation, it's like only scientists knew things like the answer to what is air. And son, we can go to the library and look at the encyclopedia and, explore it, and then we'll find out together what is air, right? He's like, well, go on the computer and find out. He's 5, right? And I thought, wow, if he can figure out what is air at 5, imagine what he's gonna be doing. And I happen to have a 5-year-old granddaughter right now.
Yeah.
And she spends a lot of time, with technology, I have a 5-month-old granddaughter now, and yesterday when she was having her little "I had a shot and everything hurts," the only thing that made her happy was my Apple Watch. Because it's addicting, right? It's like,
Yeah.
"Oh, look
Yeah. Yeah.
at that toy. That one is the best." I don't think it's thinking for us. That's the for me, maybe that's where I can get solace and
Yeah.
optimism, right?
I think it's
It's
quite extreme. We can easily hear stories about people using it to cheat in exams, or we can see people using it to write a million emails without trying.
because, cheating in exams is such a new phenomenon. Oh, not that.
But also, you can use it
There
to train
hasn't been a
yourself.
technology in the world since education began that hasn't figured out how to cheat on an exam. My daughters went back to school and, she's like, "Yeah, it's kind of a" they call it an open book, it's an open computer exam, but my
Wow.
teacher said, "Okay, listen, I've timed it. If you Google every answer, you won't have time to finish." You
I
know,
like that.
so she built the test. She's like, "You can only answer this in time if you actually know this stuff, because if you don't get up, it won't take you enough time." And she's like, "I'll give you credit for looking it up, right? You get a very good grade because I really want you to know the material, right?"
So
Uh,
I guess with that in mind, and this will be my last question. When you look towards your grandkids and the next generation and the generation after, what kind of advice are you giving people on how to thrive in this kind of future?
to be open to the possibilities of what it can mean and to be equally skeptical.
Yeah.
Right. I don't mean to embrace everything wholeheartedly and roll over and go, "Oh, isn't this amazing? I can cut my workforce by 50% because AI is going to do 50% of the work." Because then, 100% of the time, you're going to find later, oops, it actually didn't replace judgment.
Yeah.
So you talked about my philosophy. People used to ask me if you could have one, like, I wrote the values for Netflix as actionable attributes, right? I wanted
Yeah.
them to be, I wanted to be things that you do, not things you aspire to do. And if I could only have one, it would be judgment,
Okay.
right? If I could have one trait in the best employee ever, it would be that the person makes the right call. And I think that's the advice I would give to people is don't forget the one thing you have as a human that really is hard to replace. And that's your ability to use your human experience in life to think about how to judge what's happening with this computer. It's a computer.
Patty McCord, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Tom. It's been great.